Seed is life, life is seed.
Like maize, wheat is also a member of the cereal group of plants, which also include barley, oats, rice and rye. Wheat is among the most important cereal crops grown in many regions of the world for human consumption. Processed wheat contains nutrients, which are essential for good nutrition, like protein, starches, dietary fiber, vitamins and minerals. Most food derived from wheat is high in energy and low in fat. Throughout the history of civilization, wheat and other cereal-based foods have been consumed as staple foods. Wheat is the second most important grain crop produced in South Africa. Locally produced wheat is mostly for bread, breakfast cereals, biscuits and rusks. Small quantities of durum wheat are produced in certain areas for the production of pasta. The origin of formal wheat breeding is found in the 19th century, when single-line varieties were created through selection of seed from a single plant noted to have the desired properties. Modern wheat breeding developed in the first years of the 20th century. The South African seed industry has become internationally renowned for the development and cultivation of hybrid wheat. One of the leading wheat research stations in South Africa is found at Napier, in the heart of the Overberg in the Western Cape.
The machine behind
Driekus is a specialized plot combine used in wheat breeding research to harvest plots of pure lines. The purpose of harvesting these lines separately is to establish a respective yield. Various variables are monitored by the harvester monitor, which can be rapidly analyzed to determine yield. At this stage of plant improvement through breeding, quality considerations like milling and baking abilities have already been determined. Up to 7 generations of pure lines are planted in such trials. Purity of the lines is maintained by planting them in separate plots for seed multiplication purposes. For maintaining purity of the harvested material, the sieves and weighing mechanism of the combine are properly cleaned by means of compressed air and brushes. The combine is also flushed during the first 5 meters of the next plot to remove any possible remnants of the previous plot.
So therefore we keep have strict quality control to keep our line as pure as possible.
We've got a donut plant.
Conventional breeding, however, is an extremely long and tedious process and can easily take from 10 to 13 years to release a new wheat cultivated variety. This period can be significantly reduced by using technologies such as doubled haploid breeding. This is done by removing the anthers from the wheat floret, thus blocking self-pollination. An interspecific cross using maize pollen in combination with hormone application is used to induce embryo development. These embryos are haploid. In other words, contain only half the chromosome number of a normal wheat plant. The embryos are carefully excised and regenerated in vitro. Haploid plantlets are then transplanted into pots for further development. After approximately 1 month, the plantlets are lifted again and treated with colchicine, a chemical which induces the doubling of the actual chromosome number. Plantlets are now trimmed and replanted in a greenhouse until maturity. The mature seed will subsequently contain 2 mirror image sets of chromosomes, and only characteristics derived from the mother component of the original plant.
That the plant will only have female characteristics and no male characteristics.
After a long breeding process of about 12 years and costing up to 12.5 million rands, we end up with a product that's got excellent quality as well as good yields and with good resistance to the major diseases. So we asked the farmers to buy certified seed to secure the future of wheat breeding in South Africa.
According to current legislation on plant breeders' rights, a farmer is allowed to save grain for reuse as seed only for own purposes on the land occupied by him or her. This is the so-called farmer's privilege principle. They may, however, neither sell nor exchange such seed. Farmers should always remember that despite the possible lack of obvious differences between saved and certified seed, there is, amongst other seed quality considerations, an imminent deterioration in genetic integrity in the case of saved seed. This could cause the farmer to spend more on other agricultural inputs than would have been the case with certified seed purchased from a credible merchant, without the farmer even realizing the disadvantage. The retention of harvested material for replanting purposes is particularly prevalent in self-pollinating crops like wheat, soybeans, dry beans and groundnuts. Despite the fact that seed certification for genetic integrity is voluntary in South Africa, most cultivated varieties of wheat and groundnuts in particular have been legislated under compulsory seed certification schemes in order to protect the massive public investment that went into research and development of these crops. Wheat flour is a food ingredient that is processed from the ripened grain, harvested from mature, field-dried wheat plants. Wheat flour processing has evolved over thousands of years, but still involves grinding or milling of whole wheat grains into finely granulated powders, known as flour, and coarsely granulated meal, known as semolina, which can be easily mixed with other food ingredients, or further processed in some way into foods that are ready to eat. The milling industry produces on average 2 million tons of milled wheat annually, which is then converted into flour. The milled products include brown bread flour, whole wheat flour, white bread flour, cake flour, self-raising flour, and industrial flour. The industry sells the milled wheat to industrial users, wholesalers, and to neighboring countries. Most of the flour and meal produced during milling is used for bread baking. The millers source their raw material either from domestic producers or from international markets through imports. The major product of the baking industry is bread, and 70 to 80% of all flour produced is used for bread baking. The industry is the second major supplier of energy in the national diet, after maize meal. Annual consumer expenditure on bread was estimated at almost 15 billion rands in 2008. National bread consumption is estimated at 2.8 billion loaves per annum, or approximately 62 loaves per person per year.
Seed is life, life is seed.